We're actually going to kick off because it's now 12:31. So hopefully we'll have a few more join us. But for those of you that are here, hi and welcome to today's sleep session. My name is Hayley Pedrick. I'm here today on behalf of DH Consulting. And I'm here because I am a functional medicine trained nutritional therapist, and I am the natural medicine consultant to the London Sleep Centre. So for those of you that have not met me before, I have 13 years of clinical practice. My practice is on Harley Street, and I work with a lot of sleep patients, so insomniacs and sleep apnea patients. It's by no means the only kind of work that I do. My specialist area is actually human performance. And so in addition to my functional medicine role, I'm also an executive coach, and I'm the only coach that combines both natural medicine with neuroscience-based coaching principles to help people to really energize their true potential on every level. So I work with the brain and the body. But for today, we're going to be focusing in on sleep. And I'm so glad to be here with you. Our session is going to be divided into 3 parts. I know I need to be mindful of time, so I will be. I am looking forward to dialoguing with you. So please talk to me in the chat box. There are only a few of you in the room, so we've got plenty of time, I believe, to answer any questions that you may have. And then that allows me to personalize and to tailor the content that I'm sharing to your unique needs, which is a wonderful gift for me to be able to do. So I do want to hear your voices constantly throughout. And in terms of what we're going to be looking at, we're going to look first and foremost very briefly at how sleep affects our physical and mental health. And then I'm going to share with you a really fantastic, easy to use formula that helps you to work out how much sleep you personally need. Before we then go on to how do we improve our sleep, and we'll look at the key sleep anchors, which is light, diet and exercise, and then supplementation that can be very supportive, before finally finishing with the habits that actually help to enhance our sleep quality and quantity. So 3 parts to today, but this is the roadmap, and do ask your questions so that I can tailor the content to you. Sleep is so important to us, and now more than ever before. Just prior to the pandemic, WHO declared a global epidemic of sleeplessness. And then, of course, the pandemic really worsened, this already epidemic issue across the world. And some of the reasons that COVID was such a sleep, sort of disruptor have something to do with the way that it totally turned our lives upside down. So it altered our daily schedules, our routines went out the window, and this had a massive impact on our sleep habits and our patterns. So people tended to go to bed later, they were waking up later, they had increased exposure to artificial light because we were trapped in our homes for, significant amounts of time. We had reduced movement. I don't know if you remember, many of us would prefer to forget, when we were allowed out for only 1 hour a day in terms of exercise. We had reduced exposure to sunlight, to nature, to the outdoors. And then, of course, we had greatly increased experience of stress and anxiety with all the uncertainty that was going on with the pandemic. So once all of that had passed, things are not quite returned to normal, are they? And now we are in a post-pandemic world, and mental health issues continue to be a challenge. Some of that is going to be a drag from COVID itself, but also we're living now in a financial cost of living strain, aren't we? A crisis in and of its own. So we have these continuing pressures. Up to a third of people here in the UK are reporting that financial problems are creating sleep difficulties for them at this point in time. So we still have these ongoing issues, and we still need to pay good attention to our sleep. And we do that because on a physical level, sleep has such a profound effect on our health and our well-being. It has been demonstrated to improve our levels of energy. When we're well rested, we can, we've got that get up and go, we can tackle life. It's got a massive impact on our immune function. And does anybody know, if you sleep for 4 hours or less on any given night, does anybody have any idea what percentage reduction we would have in immune function? So just give me a guess in the chat box. What percentage reduction in our immune function if we are sleeping 4 hours a night or less? See what people are thinking. 20%, Richard says. Yeah, higher, Richard. Yeah, higher. So does anybody want to have another guess? Yeah, Elizabeth, you've nailed it. 70%, right? Which is a significant impact on our immune system, right? So we become really vulnerable. If we are short sleeping, we become really vulnerable. Our immune system starts to get dysregulated and disrupted. And, that can have short-term implications like being more susceptible to picking up things like colds and flus, but it also can have longer-term implications as well. And so short sleep and shift work have been actually declared carcinogenic, so cancer promoting, in terms of the effects that it has on our body and our immune system function, which is pretty scary, right? And then it also has an impact on our weight management. A lot of that has to do with short sleep, increasing stress hormone production in the body. And the impact of that essentially is an upregulation in sugar in the bloodstream. And to counterbalance that, our bodies will produce another hormone, which is called insulin. And insulin is going to reduce the sugar, but it's pro-inflammatory and it's pro-fat storage. So people that are struggling with sleep will often also struggle with weight because their body has been primed through the lack of sleep to actually hold on to fats. And then it's also been documented to increase risk of other serious health problems such as Alzheimer's. That's because the brain doesn't detoxify very well if you don't get a good night's sleep. While we're sleeping, our brain cells will shrink down and the spaces between them will open up to 60%. And then your cerebrospinal fluid gets flushed through the brain like a high-powered hose, like a pressure hose, and it cleans out debris from the day. And if it doesn't do that on a regular basis, these neurofibrillary tangles and plaques will build up and they increase our risk of developing things like Alzheimer's. And then the type 2 diabetes and heart disease, again, a lot of that has to do with stress hormones and inflammation in the body and the upregulation in sugar. That increases our risk of getting those particular illnesses. So lots of stuff on a physical level, that sleep does to protect us if we are sleeping well. And then on an emotional level, it's really important to note that the brain centers that govern our mental health and wellness also govern our sleep, right? So they overlap. And of course, if we have had sleep loss, we get greater amounts of stress hormones circulating in our blood system. So we feel even more stressed than we would if we had had a good night's sleep. And over time, if it persists, the way that the brain deals with emotions becomes altered. So when we are triggered by an event, an emotion arises in the amygdala, which is the primal area of the brainstem, and it's associated with fear. So fear and emotional response, the amygdala. And then our body it'll usually send that through the prefrontal cortex, which is our higher thinking center located at the front of the brain. And the higher thinking center's job is to check the emotion and say, yes, that emotion is valid, or no, it is not. And you can choose then to react or respond differently. So it's an important part of our emotional regulation and our emotional intelligence. However, when we have consistent sleep loss, instead of the brain processing the emotions through that pathway, it will instead reroute them. So instead of going to the prefrontal cortex, it comes back into the locus ceruleus, which is another area of the primal brainstem that drives up the secretion of more stress hormones, particularly adrenaline and noradrenaline. And then we can be a lot more irritable and a lot less regulated in the way that we respond to things. So we become more and more sort of at risk of having stress reactions, and then stress is a risk factor for other types of mental illness such as anxiety and depression. So really interesting in terms of the way that sleep has a very grounding, stabilizing impact on our mental health and our emotional well-being as well. So understanding that and understanding how important it is that we get a good night's sleep, What is your personal sleep success formula? And this is something that took me a number of years actually to discover. When I first started presenting on it, the research would just tell us everybody should be sleeping between 6 and 8 hours a night in order to have optimum mental and physical health and well-being. And I used to get really frustrated, with that particular figure, because it's a massive band, isn't it? 2 hours. So are you a 6-hour sleeper, or are you an 8-hour sleeper? Where do you fall, in that continuum? What is actually best for you as an individual? And then I came across a sleep scientist whose name is Dr. Michael Bruce. He's very active in the US. I work with a company here called Haston's, which is a very high-end luxury bed company. He's their sleep scientist in the US. I'm their sleep keynoter and practitioner here in the UK. And Dr. Michael Bruce came up with this wonderful formula that says that if we want to work out how much sleep we personally need, you can very simply calculate what time you need to be awake in the morning. And for most of us, Monday to Friday, because we have jobs that stabilize our routines, it'll be the same time every single day from Monday to Friday. So that is your socially determined wake up time. Let's say, for example, it's 6 a.m. in the morning, right? And so you need to be up at 6 o'clock. So you count backwards 7.5 hours, which is how much the average person needs to sleep to be their best the next day. And you discover that your bedtime is roughly 10:30 p.m. at night. So 10:30 p.m. at night, you jump into bed and you put yourself to sleep. And over the course of the week, if you have been short sleeping, you should be working off what we call the social jet lag, your sleep deficit. And by the end of the week, the idea is that you'll be waking up 5 minutes before your alarm clock goes off without needing the alarm clock. You'll start to surface, you'll become conscious, you will feel that you've had enough sleep and you're ready to get up and face the day. Okay, so you can still have your alarm there, that's fine as a safety net. But the idea is that you'll be surfacing before it goes off, so it's not jolting you out of sleep. And so then you know that 10:30 at night is the right time for you to go to bed. However, if you start waking up much earlier than that, let's say you're waking up 15 minutes early, or you're waking up half an hour early, so we're sort of waking between 5:30 and 5:45, but you don't want to get up earlier, you actually are quite happy with getting up at 6, you can shift your bedtime later by 15 minutes or by 30 minutes. So instead of getting into bed at 10:30, you'll get into bed at 11:15 or at 11 o'clock at night, and you will still get enough sleep to wake up by 6 o'clock without the aid of the alarm clock. So you're surfacing before the alarm clock goes off. Now, when I say that, is there anybody in this room that has just realized that I have asked them to go to bed significantly earlier than they ordinarily would go to bed? So more than an hour earlier than you would go to bed. Because if you have, please let me know, put that in the chat box. I do want to know that because I've got specific instructions that I would give to you. Okay, so if I don't have any of those bodies, great. But if I do, then I need to help you to personalize this in a way that is going to be better aligned to your internal clock. Because I don't want you waking up in the early hours of the morning because you won't thank me for it. Okay, so Richard, okay, so you've been potentially going to bed more than an hour later than would be considered optimal in terms of the sleep experiment. So my advice to you is that rather than jumping into bed at, let's say, 10:30 at night, rather by 15 minutes, shift your bedtime slightly earlier every single week. So from tonight, start going to bed at 11:15 for the rest of this week. Next week, you go to bed at 11. The idea is that you will slowly work back towards 10:30. You may never, ever need to go as far as 10:30, because the moment that you start waking up ahead of your alarm clock or feeling like you've had enough rest, that's your sweet spot, right? So you don't need to do it by getting into bed at 10:30 because it's just too early for you. And then you might find that you wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning or something like that, and your body clock will not enjoy such a strong deviation so quickly. So it's better to do it in small increments of 15 minutes and look for your sweet spot that way. because you'll probably find that it's around 11, or maybe it's 10:45, but it's not necessarily as early as 10:30. So hopefully that will help those of you that are more night owl orientated, right? And there is very strong mental health benefits, by the way, for people that are night owls. People that are night owls are at much greater risk of developing mental health problems. And that's because their bodies are literally out of sync with society. So they are forced to get up and do their job at the same time as a lark, and their brain is not on board until the middle of the day. And then their optimum times for performance are going to be late in the afternoon into the evening. And unfortunately, that means that they tend to then work longer hours. So they are present at their desks, but not really functioning very well. So they therefore try and cram everything into the end of the day, when suddenly their body clocks wake up and they're having this period of high performance. And then they tend to work longer hours, and of course they're getting less rest, and then they're having poor sleep, and so it becomes a vicious cycle. So night owls really benefit from training themselves to go to bed earlier. I am a night owl. It took a little bit of practice, but I've realized that if I get into bed by 11, that really works for me, and I'm able to go to sleep, stay asleep, and then get up the next day before my alarm clock. If I miss 11, I'm going to find it really hard to get to sleep before 1 a.m. And that's because you get an extra shot of stress hormones. It revs you up, you become really awake, you feel really alert, because you are, and it takes your body about 2 hours or so to clear those stress hormones out the system. And so, it's one of those things that you've got to start to learn where your tipping point is. My tipping point is around 11 o'clock at night. So I hope that helps those of you that are night owls, because actually the research does show us that it is better even for night owls to train themselves to go to bed earlier. So sleep success anchors and improvers. There are 3 things that you need to do in order to sleep well. And this is absolutely fundamental. If I can't get my insomniac patients to do this, I will not be able to get them to transition off their medication. And definitely, we work very holistically at the London Sleep Centre. Sleep medication is not the same thing as natural sleep. You get far greater health benefits from natural sleep. So we always want people to move off their medication if that is a possibility for them at all. And if they don't do these sleep anchors, their chances of getting off that medication are very slim. Okay. The very first and the most powerful anchor is use light. Okay. Light is the most powerful commander of your sleep-wake cycle, that circadian rhythm. And especially we need to use light in the morning. So pre-11 o'clock in the morning, getting as much light exposure that you possibly can. And by this, wherever it is available to us, natural light is the preference. So you want to get up, you want to get the curtains open, you want to make sure that you are getting outside before 11 o'clock. So that might be standing on your balcony and having a cup of tea. Or if you don't have a balcony, maybe you can stand in the summer by an open window. When you open the windows, it removes the filter of the glass pane. You get greater UV exposure, far more light spectrum exposure. It helps to keep you awake. And you'll get a good expression of your get up and go hormone, which we also know is our stress hormone, called cortisol. It should be highest 1 hour after waking in the morning, and then it slowly tapers off over the course of the day so that your melatonin can rise at night. That's the dark hormone that helps you to sleep. If your cortisol level is running high late in the day, it blocks the rising of melatonin. And then you do not sleep very well. You find it hard to drop off, and you don't get very good quality sleep if your melatonin is disrupted. And cortisol is very, very responsive to light. So the more light in the eyes, the higher the cortisol level, and the better it is for our bodies during the daytime. And then once we hit the afternoon, we want to start moving over to more natural light, reduced light exposure in the rooms. Certainly 2 hours before bed, you want to make sure that you get all the overhead lights in the house off. So I will switch over to candles. For those of you that have got lamps, you can put lamps on in the house, or just turn half the lights in the house out. Okay, so this is very, very important. In the evening, 2 hours before bed, you want low lights. The other option that you can do is you can use blue blockers. And so I'm just going to grab mine over here just so you can see what they look like. But blue blocker glasses I love because they're going to filter the light in the room, but they're also going to filter the light from your screens. Right, so televisions, iPads, phones, laptops, etc. It's going to block out the light. So this is what they look like. These are my Sonics. These go on after 8 o'clock at night, especially if I'm working. You know, sometimes we do. It's just life, right? So if I'm working at night, these are always on after 8 o'clock at night. And they make a massive difference because they help to block that cortisol from rising. And so it helps to keep your melatonin in a healthy place so that when you are finished, you can go to sleep and still get decent sleep if you're using your blue blocker glasses. It has been shown that night mode on your devices, it dials the blue light down, but it does not turn the blue light off. And that's important because it means blue light stimulates cortisol production. And it has been demonstrated that if you look at a device and you haven't got your blue blocker glasses on within the 2-hour window before bed, it reduces your feelings of sleepiness. It increases the length of time it takes you to fall asleep. It reduces your melatonin secretion. It reduces your REM sleep, which is the rapid eye movement sleep that is absolutely fundamental to you waking up in the morning feeling refreshed and ready for the day per REM sleep, and you do not feel ready for the day, right? And it also will reduce your next morning alertness if you're looking at your device in that 2-hour window before bed. So I have blue blockers, my kids have blue blockers, we all use them, and I deeply encourage you to do similar or at least get the lights down in the house at night. So up in the morning, down at night. And then the second anchor that is really important is diet. Now, this is a proven military protocol. It's actually called the Argon diet. The military will use it to help soldiers to adjust to a new time zone when they are getting combat ready and they're having to drop them off into territory where they may be experiencing jet lag, because obviously that makes them very vulnerable and that's dangerous for them. So diet is something that we can use to help, again, to get our circadian rhythm to sync up so that we have better day-night cycles within our body. We have better wake and better sleep cycles. So the first thing that is important for us to remember, particularly if you're struggling with sleep difficulties, is breakfast within an hour of waking. If you do not currently have sleep difficulties, you can play around with the trends at the moment that are, you know, time restricted eating, intermittent fasting, absolutely fine. But if you are struggling with your sleep, those are a no-no, a complete no-no. I had 2 clients last year give themselves insomnia by playing around with intermittent fasting and trying to breakfast around midday. One of them was trying to break his fast and have 1 meal a day. I mean, there's all sorts of silly things that people read about, they listen to podcasts, you know, there's lots of this kind of stuff going on with the American-led scene, and they couldn't understand how they had suddenly developed insomnia, right? And literally within 3 days of putting breakfast back in, and there's a very specific breakfast that I like to use, which is chia seed puddings. And chia seeds are something that I've discovered. They are very high in tryptophan, which is an amino acid that is converted into serotonin, which relaxes you, and serotonin is converted into melatonin. So chia seeds are excellent for that. They regulate your blood sugar balance. If our blood sugar is out of control, it elevates the sugar, and then we get an insulin response, which then drops the sugar, and then we get a stress response, which is cortisol, to help us to get the sugar back up, or otherwise we would just go to sleep. And so we end up on this roller coaster all day long. And if you don't have good regulated blood sugar, I promise you, you will wake up around 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. So, you know, chia seeds help to even that out. They just slow down the release of sugar in the bloodstream. They keep it nice and even, and then they're very high in antioxidants, and antioxidants help to prevent inflammation. And there's a specific pathway in the brain that will interfere with sleep that is related to inflammation. So chia seed puddings are my favorite recommendation for breakfasts. And then ensuring that we have regular meals and snacks throughout the day. So we're never going longer than 4 hours between meals, because if we do, blood sugar level drops, stress hormones get secreted, And then, of course, we don't want too much of that happening, because then too much cortisol and stress levels will reduce melatonin at night. And it's not just about making sure that we eat regularly. We also need to include protein and healthy fat in the diet, because that will delay the blood sugar into the bloodstream, and that helps to keep things nice and even. And then finishing eating 2 to 3 hours before bed, really important. If we don't, what can happen is, if we've eaten something that is very high in stimulatory amino acids, so things like tyramine and tyrosine, that would look like cheese, it would look like fried foods. We're looking at here at Chinese, pizza, burgers, sausages, anything that is really, really heavy and quite fatty, and particularly if it's fried, that's going to really wake you up, right? Those stimulatory amino acids will keep you feeling very, very alert late at night. And then the second part is that if we have a heavy meal, so let's say you do something healthy, let's say you have salmon and vegetables, and it's a nice good chunk of salmon fillet, so about 90 grams worth of salmon fillet, which would be a standard size in the supermarket. Then actually our body having to digest protein is quite heavy at that time of night. And so even though you go to sleep, what I've documented in the clinics through the sleep studies that I do on people is that their body stays in stress mode. It's trying to digest that food. It does not go into parasympathetic recovery mode for a couple of hours until that food is fully dealt with and fully digested, because our digestion slows by 50% if we are lying horizontal and unconscious. Okay, so the moment that we're sleeping, digestion will halt, or it won't halt, but it slows by 50%. Takes us longer to digest that food. And then we do not go into recovery mode, so we don't get the same quality sleep. So if we finish eating 2 to 3 hours before bed and we feel a little snackish, herbal teas can reduce cravings, and they enhance the antioxidants that help us to have better sleep. So we can use things like chamomile, we can use things like lemon balm, we can use things like valerian. Valerian is a very strong, well-proven, lots of good, robust research on valerian in terms of sedative. Valerian is a sedative. Lemon balm is calming. Lemon balm enhances the production of a calming neurotransmitter in the brain called GABA. And chamomile is relaxing, right? So 3 different types of herbs that I've given you there: relaxation, calm, and sedative. If you are on any medication, you do need to double check to make sure that it is safe for you to try any of these herbs. Okay, because lemon balm, for example, does not go, it interacts with certain thyroid medications. Valerian might have an impact with other types of drugs as well. So just please, if you're going to try any of these things, make sure that you've checked your medication for safety first. And then the third anchor that is really important is exercise. And again, if my clients that are insomniacs cannot establish an exercise routine, it's very unlikely that they are going to sleep well. And exercise is very, very powerful, right? Its effects have been demonstrated to be similar to that of sleeping pills. Okay, so movement is medicine. And one of the reasons for this is that when we exercise, we produce ATP. It's the currency of energy expenditure. And ATP creates a sleep pressure in our brain, so it allows us to feel tired. High to moderate intensity exercise has been shown to improve our slow wave sleep. So our bodies will move from light sleep to slow wave sleep to REM sleep. So, we kind of go through these cycles. Slow wave sleep is all about cellular rejuvenation. It's about your brain cells getting the clearance that they need. It's about detoxification of other body systems. It's about repair to the cellular body, the creation of new cells. It's about enhancing immunity. There's all sorts of stuff that happens in slow wave sleep, so it's really important that we get good exercise, and we can do high to moderate intensity. And it's best done in the mornings or midday. If you cannot and you need to exercise in the evening, then no later than 2 hours before bed. So that's the rule. And it's because exercise, in addition to releasing endorphins that make us feel good and they make us feel relaxed, and in addition to the ATP, that energy currency that is produced that creates the sleep pressure, Exercise is a physical stressor, and so it also releases stress hormones. So if you are exercising quite late at night, and I have known people who want to come home from work and go for a run at 10 o'clock at night, it's just not on, right? You are not going to be able to get recovery like you want or like you should get, because your body's going to have to clear out those stress hormones that you've just generated by going for a quick sprint around the block, sort of late at night. So you want to come home earlier. You want to get your exercise in earlier in the day. It's really important for people to understand that as well. And then supplementation wise, supplements can be a support, but please remember supplements are supplementary, right? So, if you're not utilizing light in the way that I've asked you to, if you are not making sure that you eat at the right times and that you get that protein and the essential fats in to the diet, and if you are not exercising, the likelihood of supplementation having a profound impact on your sleep is quite slim. So they have a compounding effect. We call it stacking, right? When you stack each of these factors on top of one another, they are powerful and they are potent sleep regulators. But if you use just one or two of them in isolation, then you can't expect to have the same results. So when it comes to supplementation for sleep, the supplement that I will most commonly document in my clinic that people require is magnesium. So I do a lot of functional testing, and I look at people's nutrient levels for various different reasons. Sometimes it is to give me clues as to why they are not sleeping very well. And magnesium is something that in my 13 years of clinical practice, and I have now run hundreds and hundreds of these tests, I have only ever come across one person who had adequate magnesium levels. And that person was the wife of a hedge fund manager, and her life was not the same as most of my clients' lives, right? So most of my clients are working, they're under a fair amount of pressure, and their jobs, depending on what level of the organization, because I work with a lot of peak performers and high performers in organizations, they're under a lot of stress and a lot of pressure. And when we are, our body dumps magnesium at an accelerated rate. So we utilize a lot of magnesium to keep pace with the stress response. And unfortunately, our commercial over-farming has depleted magnesium in the soils significantly. So the plants are not getting magnesium, and therefore we are not getting magnesium, because when we eat those plants, it's not an adequate supply. It's very difficult to keep up with the magnesium requirement through dietary intake alone. So certainly when we are struggling, or when we recognize that we are under pressure, or if our sleep is not as good as it could be, then magnesium is something for us to consider. Okay, so as always, with any supplements that I'm recommending, please check for safety before you just go ahead and try these things. But you'll notice that I've specifically put in there magnesium glycinate. And 200 to 400 milligrams, they come in 200 to 400, 200 milligram doses. So it would be 200 in the morning and 200 in the evening if you were doing a 400 milligram dose. And the reason that I've said a glycinate is that glycinate gets into the cellular body and is much more supportive of sleep than a magnesium citrate. So magnesium citrate is used for something different. It's used to help to regulate the bowels. So if you've got constipation, then I might use a magnesium citrate. However, if you have sleep difficulties, I'm much more inclined to try first a magnesium glycinate or a malate, but the glycinate is always my first port of call. Most people respond very well to it. And then the next supplement that I have found that has had, very, very strong improvements on people's sleep is something called Cherry Active. And Cherry Active you can find in even Costco stock Cherry Active. I believe Holland & Barrett will stock Cherry Active. It's relatively inexpensive. You could get it through Amazon. 4 tablespoons a day have been documented to enhance people's melatonin. So you get natural production of melatonin, that dark hormone that helps you to sleep. And it also helps to reduce inflammation in the body. And within 8 days, if this is a supplement that is going to be helpful for you, most people will start to notice an improving effect on their sleep, so that they're getting either a little bit more sleep or that they're feeling like they're sleeping better. And sometimes people are documenting that because lots of people are using Aura rings these days, or Whoop watches and those kinds of things. So Cherry Active at a dose of 4 tablespoons a day has been shown to be effective. I have documented it to be effective through clinical testing in my clinic as well. And then CBD, I must mention because it's so trending at the moment and so many people are interested in it and they're wanting to learn more. But CBD has not had direct links to improving sleep per se. However, it does have very strong benefits for reducing feelings of anxiety. So if that is you, if anxiety and a racing mind is part of the thing that's keeping you up at night or waking you in the early hours of the morning, then using some CBD supplementation is worth a try, just to see how it lands in your body. Okay, so those are 3 things that I have found to be interesting and useful in the clinic. And then our finishing today is just habits that enhance our sleep quality and quantity. And it's really important for us to understand that as biological beings, you know, we are creatures that bodies respond literally to the day-night cycle. And when we have specific habits and routines that tell our body that it is time for bed, that this is where we are going, that we are expecting that we are going to sleep, that we are expecting we are going to sleep well, then actually what it does is our brains and our bodies will, before we actually start to sleep, the moment that we engage in the ritual, they will start to recognize this is where we are going. This is what is expected of us. And the body and the brain will begin to prepare itself to help you to sleep better. And so habits and rituals are very powerful in terms of enhancing sleep quality and quantity, because they literally code the body and brain for better sleep. And essentially they have been shown to help your body to get to sleep faster, to cycle through each sleep cycle more efficiently and quicker. And if we do this and we practice on a regular basis, we can actually train ourselves to sleep shorter because of the efficiencies, right? And I don't mean significantly shorter. When I say shorter, you might gain another 15 minutes, maybe half an hour at the max, okay? So you're not going to gain an hour and a half, you're not going to gain 2 hours of efficiency, but you might gain 15 minutes to 30 minutes if you do this on a regular basis. And a regular basis looks like 80% of the time sticking to the habit, sticking to the ritual, getting to bed at the right time and priming the brain before you get into bed with the routine that helps you to prepare for sleep. And so the recommended routine that I'm sharing with you, and this has got good documented research and certainly in my clinical experience has been very powerful, is 1 hour before bed, we start with 20 minutes of finishing off tasks, okay? So you don't have to stop an hour before bed and start unwinding. The first 20 minutes of that final hour before you go to sleep is about completing tasks. That might be finishing your work tasks. It might be writing out your to-do list for the next day. That's my preference, because when you do that, it allows the brain to relax. It knows that it's prepared. It knows that it's ready. It knows where it's going the next day. It's way more effective than journaling. Okay, so that's how I like to spend my 20 minutes. But you might spend it differently. It might just be completing on your work task. Maybe it's completing on tidying up the home, finishing the dishes, you know, clearing up. Then the next 20 minutes are what we call sleep hygiene. So you would be brushing your teeth. You would potentially be having a shower. You would be putting on your pajamas. If you use any kind of aromatherapy, sleep sprays, you would spray your pillow down, okay? These are all steps in the ritual that would get you to bed. Certainly for all of us, the lights are down, the candles are on, or the lamps are on, okay? And then the final 20 minutes when you are prepared for bed is about relaxation. And this is going to look different for different people. So some people want to read. If you're on a tablet, you have your blue blocker glasses on. Otherwise, we're reading books by lamplight. I have seen people listen to music and they go into recovery mode. So reading, recovery mode. Listening to music can go into good recovery mode. Mindfulness and meditation practices, people will go into recovery mode, or they can practice things like breathing techniques. And this 4-7-8 breathing technique is, again, very well documented to help with sleep. It's something that can be utilized if you wake in the early hours of the morning as well, to get you back down and back into sleep. And usually people will do about 6 rounds of it and they find that they are already asleep. Okay, so the way that the 4-7-8 breathing technique works is that you inhale for a count of 4, you hold for a count of 7, and then you exhale for a count of 8. So it's really simple. Inhale for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8. And I've had clients say to me, I couldn't remember the numbers, but that doesn't matter. It will still work. All you need to remember is the exhalation is twice as long as the inhalation, and there's a short breath hold in between. Okay, so you just remember the exhalation's twice the length of the inhalation, and there's a short breath hold in between. And that will allow you to just practice this kind of technique. And it is very, very relaxing, puts the body into recovery mode. Recovery mode is where we want to be because we get the optimum quality sleep when we are already in recovery. It allows for enhanced slow wave sleep and cellular regeneration. It allows for easier access into the deeper sleep stages and into the REM sleep stages as well. So that is something that is very, very useful, and understanding, you know, that ritual and how it preps the body. It prepares body and brain for sleep. It helps you to sleep better and more efficiently. It's just good. It's good for people to know this, right? Because you can start to utilize it for yourself. I had a discussion with a client last week who came to me specifically for sleep. And I spoke to her about her evening routine, and she was making the mistake of not putting her blue blocker glasses on. She'd become lazy about them. You know, she'd bought them, she'd worn them for a while, and now she stopped wearing them. So getting the lights down, putting the blue blockers on were 2 first steps in improving her routine. And then she does this unwind routine naturally, interestingly. But that 20 minutes of finishing off tasks, you know, I said, write the to-do list for the next day. She was instead journaling. And I said to her, you know, the journaling side of things has been shown to actually be less effective. And she said, no, this is what I do. I have to do this. This is what helps me to sleep better. So I said to her, okay, that's fine. And I can understand that. And I can understand why you are wedded to doing that as a routine, because you've noticed that it works for you. But can we close the journaling practice with, when you put your pen down, when you close your journal book, and she only is able to write for 1 page, so she can't journal indefinitely all night. It's a restricted journal that she uses. When you close that 1 page and you've done your brain dump, I want you to just spend 1 moment recalling 3 to 5 things that you are grateful for at the end of the day. I just want you to go into gratitude, 3 to 5 incidences. Think of 3 to 5 things that you can do a little thank you for at the end of the day to close that out. And let's see the impacts. And she was wearing the Aura ring to document her sleep. And she was very skeptical, but she said, okay, she would go ahead and do it. And she did. She went away and she did it. And what we discovered was that she immediately got more deep sleep than she had had in the last 3 months of wearing the Aura ring and doing her normal unwind routine. Okay, so that's something interesting that I wanted to share with you as well, because we are looking at that relaxation practice. You know, we are looking to put our bodies into recovery mode, and sometimes it's just tweaking something very slightly and it makes all the difference. So experiment with some new things, try and see what's going to work for you. And hopefully that'll have an interesting effect on your sleep and how you feel. So thank you so much for being here with me today. I wanted to ask if anybody has any further questions, because I'm here. I'm aware that it's 1:15 and you want to go out and get 15 minutes worth of sunshine, hopefully, on the remainder of your lunch break. But I will be here. So for those of you that do want to go and have some food and get, have a little bit of a break, please do that. But also, if you've got anything that you would like to know that you're still curious about, I'll stay. So use me while you've got me. So Lucia said, what are your thoughts on sleep cycles? So Lucy, we all have sleep cycles. They are approximately 90 minutes in length, roughly. And the interesting thing about sleep cycles is that in between cycles, you are neither awake nor asleep. Okay, you're in some kind of almost like a twilight zone. The problem with this is that you can feel very awake. So oftentimes people will wake in the early hours and they're not awake. They are just in between sleep cycles. But because they sense that they are no longer asleep, they will think immediately to themselves, oh no, I'm awake. I bet you it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Oh, I'm going to feel so tired tomorrow. I don't want to be awake right now. Why can't I just get a decent night's sleep? And they talk themselves awake, right? Because as they go into that stress and that anxiety about why are they awake? Why are they not asleep? They're desperate for a good night's sleep. Once that narrative kicks off in the brain, it comes with it within seconds, a whole influx of stress hormones. And those stress hormones will rev you awake. And then your body is going to take a couple of hours to metabolize and break those stress hormones down. And you are going to struggle to get back to sleep. So actually, if you find yourself awake in the early hours of the morning and you think maybe you're awake, if you just notice that you're not asleep, you just tell yourself, this is normal and natural, and I'm just in between sleep cycles. And in a few moments, sleep will follow. And if you start practicing that and you just literally are, you just go, oh, this is what this is. I'm in between sleep cycles. And in a few moments, the next cycle will follow. You can talk yourself back down into sleep. A lot of the time you can do it. Just try it. I've had loads and loads of clients that have come to me and they've tried this as a technique. They felt really skeptical about it. And then they've reported back that actually it made all the difference. So that is something that you can use. And then also something that can be very helpful to utilize is that 4-7-8 breathing technique. If I am very stressed and I am waking in the early hours of the morning, I will immediately, on the first day that it happens, I will put a banana next to my bed. And having about a half a banana in those early hours of the morning, that's I might have to use that for 3 nights or so, and then I will do my chia seed puddings for breakfast, and usually I'm straight back sleeping again as I would normally sleep. So that's another thing, because it's also sometimes when we're waking in the early hours of the morning is blood sugar dysregulation, and our bodies run out of sugar. That creates a crisis in the brain, and the brain makes you wake up because it thinks it's going to die and it needs you to feed it. And if you don't put the banana in, what you're going to do is you're going to have to get the sugar from your own body's stores. So you'll get a massive influx of stress hormones. So I use banana rather than things like, I hate orange juice. You can use a little bit of juice and some nuts, but I don't like doing juice and nuts because you have to do the juice and nuts because you need a little bit of protein and fiber to slow the juice down, or it's too much sugar. The banana's got a little bit of fiber and it's got quite good levels of tryptophan in it. So that's why I find the banana works for me, and it's not dry. I don't want something dry at 2 o'clock in the morning. So that's why I use that. But you can use juice and a little bit of nuts. That's if you don't mind chomping on that at 2 o'clock in the morning. I find I can eat a banana and stay fairly sleepy, whereas I can't do that with nuts. Okay, so let me see. What are the best techniques for getting back to sleep? So hopefully, Richard, that's given you a couple of things to try. And Tina, what do you think of taking melatonin as supplementation before bed? Tina, I'm not allowed to prescribe melatonin. I used to be able to, but they have now classified it as a pharmaceutical. So I can't. The doctor that I work with in the sleep center can. And I'm a big fan of melatonin, but I'm only a big fan of melatonin in people that really need it. I don't like people to take things if they don't necessarily need the melatonin supplementation. And there are tests that I run that measure people's melatonin levels. So it's a great antioxidant. I do find it very effective. You know, even my kids sometimes will use melatonin. My teen sometimes really struggles to sleep, so on occasion she might use it. But it's not something that we use on a nightly basis. Instead, we use magnesium most nights to support sleep, and that's pretty safe for most bodies. Lucy says, I just wondered, because you had mentioned 7.5 hours is roughly the right amount of time to sleep. So I was wondering if it was linked to having full cycles, if people have different length cycles. Yeah, so Lucy, you'll find that 7.5 hours is 6 sleep cycles, which is considered optimal, but we want to have a minimum of 4 sleep cycles, consecutive sleep cycles, not broken sleep. And they are roughly 90 minutes, you know, and that 7.5 hours it's a good benchmark, because that's what the average person will need. Some people will need slightly less, which is why you might find that you are waking earlier and you can then go to bed slightly later, because you don't need the whole 7.5 hours. Maybe you need slightly less, because either you're a faster cycler, you get through the sleep cycles much quicker, or because you literally just need less. So hopefully that's useful. Yeah. Yeah, Tina says, waking up several times a night with a dry mouth, needing to drink water. What could be the cause of that? It's disrupting sleep. Tina, I'd recommend that you get your HbA1c checked. So that's the first thing, just to make sure that it's not blood linked to glucose dysregulation and pre-diabetes. But the other reason that you would wake up with a dry mouth is because you're a mouth breather. So Patrick McEwen, if I write his name in here, Patrick. Oh, I don't know why it's not allowing me to. I think that's how we spell it. Patrick McEwen. If you have a look, he does some courses that help people with breathing. It's a Buteyko method. I do it as well, you know, so that's something that you can be aware of, that you can come to me and we can have a look at breathing techniques. But if you go through a guided practitioner-led Buteyko experience, they will teach you how to do mouth taping. And that would be an interesting thing for you to try, but only if it's safe, right? So Honorina, I'm just wondering, I repeatedly wake up at night from very vivid dreams where I know I'm dreaming, but I cannot wake up. Can you advise what I could do to help with this? And this is often a vitamin and mineral deficiency, Honorina. So I'd be having a look at making sure that you're taking a good quality multivitamin. And also potentially just doing a little bit of liver support as well. So having adding something like milk thistle tea once a day, just 1 cup of milk thistle tea, might end up being something that you would really benefit from. There's all sorts of stuff, you know, but those would be 2 starting points that I would certainly have a look at. Yeah, good. All right. Well, thank you so much. Does anybody have? Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. It's such a pleasure. And thank you so much for the questions, you know, because those are all really interesting questions. And as I said, you know, they go beyond the deck, right? So the deck's just a roadmap, but it's lovely to be able to answer things personally where you can get that support. So thank you so much, everybody, for having me here today. It's been a real pleasure. And I do hope that I get to come back. And I believe actually I might be back early next year with another presentation on behalf of DH Consulting. So I will look forward to seeing you then. And of course, you know, if anybody has any further questions, please do. I'll hang around for another, you know, couple of minutes. But otherwise, have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your short working weeks this week. Thank you. Yeah.